What can you tell us about the health of your husband and the conditions that he's being held in now?
He's still at Moscow's fifth pretrial detention center awaiting appeal. He was sentenced on April the 17th of this year, but is now awaiting appeal. After the appeal, he will obviously be transferred to the strict regime. And I think that we know the outcome of that appeal before it even happens. So there's no doubt that that strict regime is going to be the next step. At this pretrial detention center, he's held at the most secure block of that center, of that prison, with 3 locks on his door, including on the feeding slot, with bars and barbed wire on his window. This is the block reserved for most dangerous criminals. And every time he's moved to the courtroom, he's surrounded by 4 or 5 guards with a dog, and he's in handcuffs. And we're talking about someone who survived 2 poisoning attacks against him, and as a result developed polyneuropathy symptoms in his feet and his left hand, which means that he's losing sensation in his feet, losing feeling in his feet. So the entire situation is absolutely atrocious. But you see, this is one of the goals of the regime, to portray anyone who counters the official narrative as dangerous criminals, traitors, spies, or insane people. And it happens in hundreds of such cases around the country. So Vladimir's case is very illustrative in this way, because all the accusations against him are being used in other cases as well. It's just in his case, they're being piled up.
Okay, and I do want to come on to the way Russia treats critics and opponents in a moment, but have you been able to make contact with Vladimir at all? Have you managed to speak to him?
I have not seen or spoken to Vladimir in over a year since his arrest. Never once.
That is difficult, and he's in a pretty tough place now, and as you say, expecting to be moved into what you describe as strict conditions. What do you mean by that? What does that mean?
Honestly, because we're not dealing with the rule of law, and there is no justice system in Russia, independent justice system, and so a strict regime can mean many things. The fact is, he's been sentenced to 25 years of strict regime. That is the sentence. How it's going to look like, I'm not exactly sure, and I'm sure that we will only find it out when he reaches the place where he will be serving this sentence.
Okay, we can barely imagine how difficult this is for you. And our best wishes to you on that. Now, it is your view that the British government, that ministers in the British government could and should be doing more. Tell me why you say that and what you think they should be doing.
Well, in my travels, in my advocacy for Vladimir and other political prisoners in Russia, I found out that democratic countries very often are not equipped to deal with the ever-growing crisis of political prisoners and hostage-taking around the world. So the UK is not the only country that is not dealing with it in the right way. The UK government's approach has been basically to ignore such cases. Pretty much, it's just because of they're afraid that by engaging in such cases, in negotiations, they will give an incentive to those autocrats to take more hostages. And so basically, people are often left behind. In the case of Nazanin Ratcliffe, she lost 6 years of her daughter's life while she was kept in prison.
Is it fair to say that the British position, that British government ministers ignore cases like your husband's? And we were talking about a man with a British passport. You'd imagine they would surely have been making representations to the authorities in Russia at the very least.
Well, I'm very grateful to the British government for adopting sanctions against 5 persecutors of Vladimir's. But I'm slightly baffled that it was not the UK, where he is a citizen, but it was Canada, That was the first country to introduce such sanctions against
And they gave him
Vladimir's
citizenship,
persecutors.
didn't they, as a help for that?
And Canada, first of all, it introduced sanctions against 11 persecutors in Vladimir's case, whereas the UK only sanctioned 5 people. And yes, in a very beautiful gesture of solidarity and support, the Canadian government bestowed this honorary citizenship on Vladimir, and this has only been done 7 times before Vladimir. And such citizenship was bestowed on Nelson Mandela and Dalai Lama and Raoul Wallenberg, among others. So Vladimir is an absolutely astonishing company in this regard, and this is a beautiful gesture of solidarity, and I'm very grateful to the Canadian government for sending this message to the Russian government that represents such people as Vladimir as traitors and criminals. So Canada did a beautiful thing by saying, you know what, you see these people as traitors, and we will be honored to have this person as our citizen. And that is a gesture of solidarity support, not only with Vladimir, but with all those Russian citizens who stood up and opposed Putin's war despite those risks to their freedom and very often to their lives.
Okay, so you clearly appreciate the gestures and the actions from Canada. You've had support from America. What are you being told by British ministers? What are they saying to reassure you? Or try to reassure you?
Well, all the words that are being said are the right words. I just would like to see more action, honestly. And when I say that, I think that many democracies are not equipped with dealing with the present situation. Well, there is an example that could be used by other countries. The U.S. has an Office for Hostage Affairs.
Yes.
So there is a special presidential envoy for hostage affairs who engages in such cases where people sort of meet a set of criteria under the Levingston Act. So this set of criteria, meeting this set of criteria means that a person is the case reaches the office of this envoy for hostage affairs, and he gets engaged using all means available, all instruments available to advocate and to fight for this person's release. And we're not talking only about swaps, and that's what the British government seems to be afraid of, that it will be seen as dealing with those terrorists. But this office, this presidential envoy, is not only dealing in swaps. He uses all instruments available, and the Magnitsky sanctions can be one such instrument, for example, where these autocrats would be sent a signal, by imposing sanctions on a few, you would send a signal to others that they should probably think twice before engaging in similar practices.
So just to explain, the Magnitsky laws are an American law. Your husband, Vladimir, was very active in helping bring that law into being in America, and it resulted in visas being denied to named individuals. It resulted in sanctions, assets being frozen, and so on, and was seen as being very effective.
This is a revolutionary instrument that allowed because now there also exists a global Magnitsky Act, which means that not only those human rights violators in Russia can be brought to justice, but human rights violators all over the world. And so this is a truly revolutionary instrument that changed the narrative. Instead of going after entire countries, democracies, Western democracies, can go after specific human rights violators and hold them accountable for their crimes.
So, if this country had an envoy, an official in charge of an office dealing with political prisoners and hostages, and so on, what more could they do, in your view? How would that role be useful?
Well, I believe that by creating such offices, democratic countries would arm themselves in dealing with the present growing crisis of hostage-taking and political prisoners, because you see, autocrats work together. They watch each other and learn from each other. They use each other's practices, and it only makes sense. It is only logical for the democratic world to counter this behavior also together. It's like sanctions are most effective when they're imposed by several countries at the same time. So this crisis of hostage-taking should be approached in the same way. And by creating these offices in different democratic countries, democracies would be able to cooperate on this, to bring their efforts together, to not only deal with the present cases that already exist, but also, which I think is hugely important, to develop a set of instruments to counter such practices, to prevent them from happening, from being used in the future as well. Because prepared or not prepared, whether these democracies are prepared or not to deal with the crisis will continue growing.
Yes.
So I believe that it is, well, it's basically irresponsible by treating a problem like it does not exist, or we do not negotiate, we don't engage. No, the problem has to be solved, and different methods can be used. And by creating such offices, I think that these democracies could put their heads together and work on solving the problem.
Yeah. Let me ask you just a little about you, Evgenia. We've spoken before. You are giving an enormous number of interviews as part of your campaigning effort. You've been speaking to politicians here, there, and everywhere. It must be exhausting.
It is. It is. And physical exhaustion is not what I'm talking about here. It's, the pain of always being away from the kids. I am neither with Vladimir in Moscow, nor am I with the kids.
How old are your kids now?
11, 14, and 17.
Okay.
And I know that they're strong and resilient and smart, and they understand the situation. And every time I say sorry for not being there for something important in their lives, they always keep saying, "Oh, Mom, that's okay. Mommy, we know that what you're doing. We know that you're fighting for our dad. But I know that they need me there, and I know that they want me there." And so that's what's truly heartbreaking about it all.
And you know better than anyone else on the planet, Evgenia, what a difficult job you have here. I mean, your husband was a leading opponent of the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin. He was a campaigner. He spoke to the American legislators. He spoke on Capitol Hill. He helped bring about the Magnitsky Law. And I could go on and on. He's been honored around the world for his efforts for freedom and reform in Russia. This is not someone Vladimir Putin or the Kremlin will want to let go easily.
I know. I realize that. And I will continue pushing. And I will continue pushing. And I will continue talking about other political prisoners as well. Because Vladimir's case is one of many. And the problem is this regime in Russia that poses a threat to our country, that poses a threat to everyone else around. So the actual solution to this problem will be to bring this regime down and turn Russia into a democracy. That is the ultimate solution to what we're witnessing today. But, I will continue fighting for Vladimir because I need my partner home. I need him home. And I also want to go back to the kids. So, I will just keep on.
Do you feel yourself at all to be at risk, you personally? And we know how ruthless the regime in Moscow is.
First of all, they have their hands full with all the pressure that they're getting from the entire world that supports Ukraine and that helps Ukraine in its noble fight against the aggressor. I think that they have their hands full, first of all. But second, the thing is, I cannot afford backing down. I'm fighting for someone I love. And in fighting for him, I cannot not fight for his cause, which is also my cause. This is my country as well. And I'm a Russian citizen, and I have to continue Vladimir's work. I'm not... he's a brilliant politician, a brilliant diplomat, he's got the knowledge, he's a historian, and he's got the amazing knowledge and understanding of historical processes. And I don't believe that I have even the skills for that kind of work. I never wanted to become a public person in the first place. But I learn as I go, and if I have to be a public person, I will be a public person, and I will continue doing this for as long as it takes me to bring him back.
Evgenia, I wish you well in all that you are doing. It's a pleasure and a privilege to speak to you.